Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that someone has been living your life. Not a stranger. Not a criminal breaking into your home. Someone using your own body. Someone spending your money. Talking to your friends. Making decisions in your name. And when people tell you what happened, you have absolutely no memory of any of it. Not because you were asleep, not because you forgot, but because, according to some people, you weren't the one in control. It sounds impossible, like the plot of a movie, the kind of story that belongs in fiction. But in 1977, a young man named Billy Milligan became the center of a case so bizarre that even experienced psychiatrists struggled to explain it. Some believed he suffered from one of the rarest psychological conditions ever documented. Others believed he was a manipulative criminal who had discovered the perfect excuse. And nearly 50 years later, people are still arguing about what was really happening inside his mind. Because according to doctors, Billy Milligan wasn't one person. He was 24. And before this story's over, you'll have to decide for yourself whether that was true, or whether the world witnessed one of the greatest deceptions in modern history. The story begins in Ohio, autumn 1977. Students at Ohio State University were scared. Several women had reported violent attacks. The crimes appeared connected. The details were disturbing, and nobody knew who would be next. Rumors spread quickly. Students stopped walking alone at night. Parents called their children and begged them to be careful. Police were under enormous pressure. Weeks passed. Then investigators finally caught a break. Evidence led them to a 22-year-old man named Billy Milligan. To detectives, the case seemed straightforward. Witnesses identified him. Evidence appeared to support the accusations. Everything pointed toward Billy. The investigation was over. Or at least that's what everyone thought. Because when Billy was brought in for questioning, something felt wrong. The detectives expected denial, maybe anger, maybe excuses. Instead, they found confusion. Real confusion. Billy didn't seem like someone trying to avoid responsibility. He seemed like someone who genuinely had no idea why he was there. Again and again, he repeated the same thing. I don't remember. The detectives weren't impressed. Criminals claimed memory loss all the time. Nothing unusual there. The questioning continued. But over the following days, people began noticing strange things about Billy. Sometimes he seemed shy and frightened. Sometimes he seemed calm and confident. His vocabulary changed. His posture changed. Even the way he looked at people seemed different from one conversation to the next. At first, nobody paid much attention. People behaved strangely under stress. But then, a psychiatrist sat down to evaluate him. And during that interview, something happened that would change everything. Billy had been speaking quietly, avoiding eye contact. His voice trembled. Then suddenly, his posture straightened. The nervousness disappeared. His expression changed. The psychiatrist later described the moment as feeling like someone had quietly left the room, and someone else had taken their place. Then the young man looked up and introduced himself. My name is Arthur. The psychiatrist frowned. Arthur? The man sitting in front of him was Billy Milligan. Yet Arthur seemed completely certain. He spoke calmly, confidently, and unlike Billy, he appeared remarkably educated. He discussed medicine, science, psychology, history. His speech was precise, measured, controlled. The psychiatrist listened carefully. Then Arthur made a claim that sounded impossible. Billy wasn't there. Billy was asleep. And Arthur wasn't alone. There were others, many others. At first, nobody believed him. But over the following weeks, the doctors would meet Arthur again and again. And every time, he appeared exactly the same. The same mannerisms, the same opinions, the same personality. It wasn't just convincing. It was unsettling. Then Arthur revealed something that would completely change the direction of the investigation. According to him, there was an entire community living inside Billy's mind. Different identities, different memories, different roles. And while some of them were harmless, others were not. The doctors were about to meet one of them, a personality named Rogin. The first time Rogin appeared, the atmosphere changed instantly. The calm, intelligent Arthur vanished. In his place sat someone far more intimidating. His shoulders were tense. His stare was intense. His voice was deeper, more forceful. Everything about him felt different. Reagan described himself as the protector. His purpose, he claimed, was to defend the family. Not Billy's family. The family inside Billy's mind. Whenever danger appeared, Reagan said he took control. Whenever violence was necessary, Rogin stepped forward. The doctors didn't know what to think. But there was something unsettling about how consistent he was. Every time Rogin appeared, he behaved the same way. He spoke the same way. He remembered the same things. And unlike Billy, Reagan claimed he remembered events that Billy couldn't. Then Reagan introduced the doctors to a concept they had never heard before. The spot. According to Reagan, whoever occupied the spot controlled Billy's body. Everyone else remained in the background, watching, listening, waiting. Imagine 24 people sharing a single car. Only one can sit behind the wheel at a time. According to Rogin, that's how it worked. The idea sounded unbelievable. But the deeper doctors investigated, the stranger the case became. Because the next personality they met wasn't intimidating, wasn't aggressive, wasn't even an adult. One afternoon, during a therapy session, Reagan disappeared. Arthur disappeared. And in their place appeared a frightened little girl. She introduced herself as Christine. Christine claimed she was only 3 years old. She loved butterflies, drawing pictures, singing songs, and she was terrified. The doctors watched as she cried. They watched her become overwhelmed by simple situations. Nothing about her behavior resembled the adults they had been speaking to. And that was the problem. The differences felt too dramatic to ignore. The same face, the same body. Yet everything else seemed different. The doctors filled notebook after notebook with observations. Each interview raised more questions, and every answer seemed to create a bigger mystery. Because Christine wasn't alone. According to Arthur and Reagan, there were many others still waiting to be discovered. Some friendly, some frightened, some intelligent, and some potentially dangerous. At this point, the investigation had become something entirely different. What began as a criminal case was turning into a journey into one of the strangest minds anyone had ever encountered. And the deeper they looked, the more impossible the story became. Because soon the doctors would meet a charming personality named Alan, a resourceful personality named Tommy, and a quiet personality whose role in the crimes would shock everyone. But before those revelations could emerge, the world was about to learn Billy Milligan's name. And once it did, nothing would ever be the same. As word spread among doctors about Billy Milligan, more specialists wanted to meet him. At first, many arrived expecting to expose a fraud. After all, the idea sounded absurd. Multiple personalities? Different identities sharing a single body? Most people simply didn't believe it. But then they sat across from Billy. And one by one, many of them left with more questions than answers. Because Arthur wasn't the only personality they encountered. And Reagan certainly wasn't the last. Soon, another personality began attracting attention. His name was Alan. And unlike Reagan, Alan made people feel comfortable. Almost immediately. Alan was funny, confident, relaxed. He knew how to make people laugh. He knew how to hold a conversation. And perhaps most importantly, he knew how to make people trust him. Doctors enjoyed talking to Alan. Journalists enjoyed talking to Alan. Lawyers enjoyed talking to Alan. There was something naturally charismatic about him. Yet that charisma created a problem. Because while some people saw Alan as evidence that the personalities were real, others saw something completely different. They saw a performer, a manipulator, someone capable of fooling everyone around him. The question lingered. Was Alan proof, or was Alan the trick? Nobody knew. And before anyone could answer that question, another personality emerged. A personality who would become one of the most fascinating figures in the entire case. His name was Tommy. Tommy wasn't known for charm, or intelligence, or aggression. Tommy was known for solving problems. Whenever something seemed impossible, Tommy looked for a way out. Locked door? Tommy searched for a weakness. Complicated situation? Tommy found an opportunity. According to reports, Tommy displayed remarkable mechanical abilities. He understood locks, tools, electrical systems, machines. Some doctors believed Tommy genuinely possessed skills that other personalities lacked. Others disagreed. They argued that Billy himself likely possessed those abilities all along. The debate continued, because every new discovery seemed to support both sides. Evidence that the disorder was real, and evidence that it might not be. The deeper investigators looked, the harder it became to separate truth from mystery. Then came a revelation that stunned everyone. A personality named Adalana. Unlike Reagan's intensity, unlike Alan's confidence, unlike Tommy's resourcefulness, Adalana appeared gentle, quiet, sensitive. She loved poetry, writing, romantic stories. Many therapists initially considered her one of the least threatening personalities. But later, Adalana's name would become one of the most controversial aspects of the entire case. Because some psychiatric reports suggested that Adalana may have played a role in the crimes. The public struggled to understand it. How could a soft-spoken female personality be connected to violent acts? The revelation shocked everyone, and it raised an even larger question. If the personalities were real, who was responsible? Billy? Adalana? Someone else? The answer seemed impossible to find. Yet the surprises weren't over. Not even close. Because as therapy continued, doctors realized they had only scratched the surface. The personalities kept appearing, one after another. A frightened child named David. A deeply religious personality named Samuel. A rebellious personality named April. A quiet laborer named Mark. An intellectual named Martin. A dreamer named Bobby. A nature lover named Walter. And many more. The list kept growing, until eventually psychiatrists reached a conclusion that shocked even them. There weren't 6 personalities. There weren't 10. There weren't 15. There were 24. 24 distinct identities. 24 different personalities. One body, one life, one criminal case. The news spread quickly. Then it exploded. Television stations covered the story. Newspapers printed headline after headline. Talk shows debated the case. Psychologists argued publicly. The entire country became fascinated. Some people viewed Billy as a victim, a deeply traumatized man whose mind had fractured in order to survive. Others viewed him as a criminal, a man clever enough to fool doctors, lawyers, journalists, and the public. The debate became impossible to ignore, and as media attention intensified, Billy's trial approached. The closer the trial came, the bigger the questions became. Because this wasn't simply a trial about crime, it wasn't simply a trial about guilt, it was becoming a trial about identity itself. Imagine standing in a courtroom and hearing a defense attorney argue that the person sitting before you wasn't necessarily the person responsible. Imagine hearing experts claim that multiple identities existed within a single individual. Imagine being asked to decide whether one personality should be held accountable for the actions of another. It sounded unprecedented. Because it was. The courtroom quickly became the center of national attention. Reporters packed every available seat. Journalists crowded the hallways. News cameras gathered outside. Everyone sensed they were about to witness history. And inside that courtroom, two completely different stories were about to collide. The prosecution believed Billy was responsible. Simple as that. The evidence pointed toward him. The victims identified him. The facts seemed clear. The defense told a very different story. They argued that Billy suffered from what was then known as multiple personality disorder. Today, it's referred to as dissociative identity disorder. According to the defense, Billy himself had no awareness of the crimes. The personalities responsible acted independently. Billy wasn't pretending. Billy was fractured. The courtroom listened. The public listened. The entire country listened. And as expert witnesses began taking the stand, the mystery only deepened. Psychiatrists described personality shifts. They described Arthur, Reagan, Alan, Christine, Tommy, and many others. Each testimony seemed stranger than the last. Some jurors appeared fascinated. Others appeared skeptical. But everyone understood one thing. The decision they were about to make would become historic. Because whatever happened next would change Billy Milligan's life forever, and perhaps change the way the world viewed mental illness. The trial was reaching its climax. The arguments had been made, the evidence had been presented, the experts had spoken. Now only one question remained. What would the jury decide? And when the verdict finally arrived, it would shock America. The courtroom was silent. Weeks of testimony had led to this moment. The prosecution believed they had proven their case. The defense believed they had revealed something extraordinary. And now, everyone was waiting. The judge, the lawyers, the reporters, the victims, even Billy himself. The verdict was about to be announced. Nobody knew exactly what would happen, because no case quite like this had ever existed before. The courtroom seemed frozen. Then the decision came. Billy Milligan was found not guilty by reason of insanity. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the reaction exploded. Some people were stunned, others were furious. Many simply couldn't believe what they had just heard. A man connected to serious crimes would not be sent to prison. Instead, he would be committed to psychiatric treatment. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed to telephones. The verdict shocked America. Some people believed justice had failed. Others believed the court had recognized a genuine mental disorder. But while the public argued, a new question emerged. And in many ways, it was even more disturbing than the first. What if Billy Milligan was lying? Think about it. If Billy truly had 24 personalities, how could anyone prove it? Nobody could enter his mind. Nobody could see what was happening inside. All they had were interviews, observations, and Billy himself. Suddenly, the entire case looked different. Because if Billy was telling the truth, he might be one of the most extraordinary psychiatric patients ever studied. But if he was lying, he might be one of the greatest manipulators in modern history. The more doctors studied him, the stranger things became. Some personalities disappeared. Others appeared. Some remembered events Billy couldn't. Others claimed they had never met each other. To supporters, it was proof. To skeptics, it was suspicious. Every new discovery seemed to answer one question, while creating three more. And that was the problem. The deeper people looked into Billy Milligan's mind, the less certain they became. Years passed. The headlines faded. The cameras left. The public moved on. But the mystery refused to disappear. Psychologists continued arguing. Researchers continued studying. Experts continued disagreeing. And nobody could deliver the one thing everyone wanted: a definitive answer. Then, in 2014, Billy Milligan died, and with him went the only person who truly knew what was happening inside that mind. No final confession, no final explanation, no final revelation, only questions. And perhaps that's what makes this story so unsettling. Not the crimes, not the trial, not even the personalities, the uncertainty. Imagine you're sitting across from Billy Milligan, not reading about him, not watching a documentary, actually sitting across from him. First you meet Arthur, calm, intelligent, confident. Then Arthur disappears. A frightened little girl appears. Then she disappears. A violent protector takes her place. Then a charming conversationalist. Then an escape artist. All in the same body? All claiming to be different people. What would you believe? Would you believe you were witnessing one of the rarest psychological conditions ever documented? Or would you think you were watching the greatest performance of a lifetime? Because that's the mystery nobody has solved. Not the crimes, not the trial, the man himself. Was Billy Milligan 24 people? Or one man who convinced the world he was? Nearly 50 years later, we still don't know. And maybe that's why this story refuses to die. Because most mysteries eventually reveal an answer. This one never did, and perhaps it never will. But now I want to hear from you. Do you believe Billy Milligan truly suffered from multiple personalities? Or do you think he fooled everyone? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy true stories that blur the line between fact and the unbelievable, make sure to subscribe and join us for the next mystery. Until then, sleep well.